In this video, what we're going to look at is how Google Analytics collects and stores data. Now, we're not going to go into the technical implementation or the coding required to implement Google Analytics 4, whether it's on an Android or iOS app or a website. But what's really fundamental at this point is that we understand roughly how Google Analytics collects the data, and more importantly, how it's stored and structured. The way that Google Analytics 4 works is no secret, and there's no secret ingredient or magic around how it operates either. When someone visits the website or the app for the very first time and has consented to be tracked, what Google Analytics 4 looks to do is to collect what's called a device ID. So that's slightly different on apps and websites, but on a website, for example, that would be a first-party cookie. Well, that does beg the question of what if they don't consent? And that's where you can't set a first-party cookie or use a device ID of any sort. In which case, Google Analytics 4 has a feature called consent mode, and consent mode allows data to be collected still, but not attached to the user or identify that user in any way, still respecting their consent choices. I've done a deep dive video all around consent mode and then the machine learning modeling that happens called behavioral modeling that affects this data to get that data back into GA4. I'll put a link into the description if you want to know more. So once Google Analytics 4 has an idea of the user or has a way to identify the user, every single action that user performs is collected into Google Analytics as what we call an event. Events are everything within GA4. GA4 only collects events. So understanding what the events are is going to be really important, and that's why each event has an event name. Whether that's page view, session start, or purchase, or scroll, or click, or download, whatever that happens to be, that's what's sent into Google Analytics 4. He did run straight past it, but he did mention session start events are included within this. Even sessions are tracked as events. Something that you've probably not had to think about in a long time, or maybe even ever, is what is a session? How do we define sessions? So to address that, I've done a deep dive video exactly on this subject, what a session is, what these session start events actually are, and what they mean. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description to learn more. So what happens every single time a user logs these things called events, it's attached to that user ID, that device ID, that's sent into Google Analytics 4, but what we need is two other elements. Firstly, we need to understand the time that these events occurred, because fundamentally we want to build timelines. We want to understand user behavior, flows, and how things progress over time. So now we understand each user's event and it has a timestamp. The last thing we need to do is identify your data from everyone else's. If you can imagine that everyone in the world using Google Analytics 4 is sending data into sort of a single bucket, and there needs to be a unique way to identify your data from everyone else's. That's using something called a measurement ID, and you can actually find that within the GA4 interface. You can even search for it in the search bar at the top of the screen. So fundamentally, Google Analytics 4 is quite a repetitive process. It tracks these things called events over and over and over again for every single user that visits your website. So in a sense, this user has done this event at this time, go put it into my set of reports. That happens over and over again for every visitor that visits your website and your applications. But where the crazy, magical, cool stuff happens is once it gets into Google Analytics, and then it can start processing all the data, which presents the data in that lovely format that we're used to when it comes to doing the reporting. In the next couple of videos, we're going to go deeper in terms of what those events are, how they are different from each other. Some of them are automatically collected, some of them might have to have a bit of manual intervention in there as well. And we're even going to have a go at setting one up as well.